Hello everyone, my name is Pramudita Pereira. As part of the Career Compass lecture series organized by University of Peradeniya, today I will be talking about artificial intelligence and signal processing. So the main focus group of this talk is third year and fourth year undergraduate students. And in this talk, I will give very broad instructions and some career guidance on how to start your career in the industry. So first of all, let me tell a little bit about myself. So I received my bachelor's degree in electrical and electronic engineering from University of Peradeniya, Sri Lanka. And then I completed my master's and PhD degrees in Rutgers University and Johns Hopkins University in United States of America. And currently, I'm working as an applied scientist at Amazon Web Services, where I engage in research and development on artificial intelligence. Right. So in today's talk, I will mainly talk about four things. First, I will broadly talk about what are the career opportunities in machine learning and artificial intelligence. And then I'll talk a bit about what are the existing courses, related courses in engineering faculty, both in electrical and electronic engineering, as well as in computer engineering. And also, I will talk about core skills that students have to develop and what are the resources they can use to develop these skills for a career in AI. And also, I conclude my talk by giving some generic interview preparation guidance. Okay, so I'd say 70% of this talk will be general career guidance related material. Maybe 20% will be related to machine learning and AI, and maybe 10% will be targeting students of University of Peradeniya. So anyone who is not a student of University of Peradeniya may also benefit from this talk for the majority of its duration. Right. So, as we all know, right now, AI and machine learning is a really hot topic in the research circles as well as in the industry. So, we know that with the advent of large language models, most tasks are slowly getting automated. So, clearly, there are a lot of job opportunities out there. So traditionally, Sri Lankan job market was not very sensitive to these advancements, but now we see that there are a lot of opportunities even in the Sri Lankan job market. But if you talk about the global job market, we can see there's a huge demand in the field of machine learning and artificial intelligence. So one thing I wanted to point out early on is that right now there are many Pera alumni who are working with top companies in the world. So I know there are colleagues of mine from Peradeniya who are working at Amazon, Microsoft, Apple, or even companies like PayPal, Oracle, all these top companies, right? So people who have received the education that you guys are receiving right now has gone on to make careers in these top companies. So the message that I wanted to give out front is that the education you are receiving right now is good enough for you to go on and have careers in top companies. And at the same time, some of my colleagues are working in the academia at places like Princeton and Harvard, right? So that is the message I wanted to give out up front, right? So your background is good enough for you to excel in this field in machine learning and artificial intelligence roles. At the same time, I'm going to talk about a lot of good things about this field. But what's another thing that I wanted to say is that, like right now, artificial intelligence and machine learning is a really hot field for employment. But what I personally feel is that you should not really drive your career ambitions based on the demand, right? Rather, I believe that you should let your passion drive your career direction, right? Just because AI and machine learning is really hot right now, you should not do a specialization on that. Rather than doing that, you should first think like what you are really interested in. If you're really interested in machine learning and AI, then that's great. You can do a specialization there, right? But if your interest is in somewhere else, I personally believe it's a good idea to pursue your interest rather than pursuing machine learning because it's a hot topic right now. But at the same time, there are certain core machine learning courses that anyone can benefit in taking. So I highly suggest doing that. Okay. So I will explain like what are the core machine learning courses that is good as an elective for everyone as we move forward. At the same time, I think as you reach the third year and fourth year study in your undergraduate program, now it's a very good time to take a step back and think like what is the purpose of education, right? Because at the end of the day, when we are in a university, our primary objective is maybe to just pass courses or to get a GPA, right? But from employment perspective, GPA, it's good to have, right? The credit requirement, it's good to have. But what's more important is that you develop the relevant skills that you can, like use to excel in your careers. At this point, I think it's very important, right? That while you engage in your academic studies, you develop these skills, right? And a key component of this is to be an independent learner, right? So whatever your lecturer is teaching in the classroom, that is fine. You should learn that. But at the same time, there should be some independent learning happening outside the classroom. So this is something we can cultivate during our undergraduate study itself, right? For example, right now there are a lot of online learning materials which are great resources, right? So if you want to expand your knowledge beyond your curriculum, right, university curriculum, there are a lot of online resources that you can use to broaden your knowledge. Okay, so that will be a good starting point. And once you have some basic understanding, it's a great idea to get start reading papers, conference papers, and journals, right? Because this is how you will get information once you pass out. Once you are out in the industry, you will be reading papers and journals to gather information. So it's a good idea to start that habit while you are in the university itself. So something I believe is that we learn a lot by doing things, right? So if it's possible to engage in independent projects, right? So maybe they are not completely related to your academic work, but if you can do some hobby projects, that will be a great way of enhancing your skill set as well as knowledge. So as you reach the third and fourth year, there are many things that we can do to use our time more effectively, right? So of course, the university will offer you elective courses that you can use to improve your technical and non-technical skill set. So at the same time, something we need to understand here is that when you go out for a job, when you're in the industry, your competition is no longer your batchmates, right? You will be competing with students from other universities. At the same time, you will be competing with students from other countries for jobs, for opportunities, right? So something I want you to understand right now is that your competition is much, much tougher than what you think that is, right? So we need to prepare extra hard if we want to excel in this setting. Okay. Right. So when we talk about machine learning and AI, there are multiple roles that are available. So I will try to briefly go through some of these roles. So we have roles that are called machine learning engineer roles. So these are engineering roles, software development roles that are directly paired with machine learning applications, right? Machine learning services, right? And then we have roles which are data scientist roles, right? So in data scientist roles, these people will be trying to draw insights from customer data, okay? And then we have AI machine learning research scientist roles, right? So in a research scientist roles, a research scientist will be doing more fundamental work. They will be trying to come up with new algorithms, test them, implement them, that sort of work, right? So it is more advanced that require like a deeper understanding of these algorithms, right? And then we have very specific use cases, natural language processing engineers or computer vision engineers, where engineers will be working on very specific targeted domains. Okay. We'll also have machine learning operational engineers as well as big data engineers, right? So big data engineers will be creating pipelines so that we can ingest data, like large scale data, right? So this is a key skill to have in big companies. And at the same time, we'll also have product managers, right? So that is also a role that is in machine learning, right? So there are a variety of roles that you can like find employment in machine learning and AI field. So in Sri Lankan job market, the job market is relatively smaller, but now what you see is like you can find these kind of roles even in Sri Lankan job market. So these are some of the jobs I've seen in the internet this week. So the message here is that the job market in Sri Lanka is also slowly growing in this field. But when you consider the global job market, machine learning and AI, those are like topics that employers are highly interested in, right? So it's a really hot market right now. So you have the supply and demand relationship, right? So when there's a lot of demand, what happens is like these jobs are typically like very well paid, right? So for an example, in this graph, you can see what are the average salaries of these professionals in US, right? And average US salary is around $50,000. So these roles are very, very well paid. Okay. So this is an indication like what is the demand these jobs cater in the global market. Okay. Right. So now I will briefly go through the types of courses offered at the engineering faculty, University of Peradeniya, uh, in these machine learning and artificial intelligence related topics. Okay. So I will start with electrical and electronic engineering. So in DEE, there's going to be a syllabus revision effective from E22 batch, right? But for students who are in third year and fourth year, they will still be using the older syllabus. So this new syllabus will have an entire specialization, like dedicated to signal processing and machine learning, right? But in this talk, I will briefly talk about the elective courses from the older syllabus. So there are several courses that are related to machine learning. The core course that has machine learning is called Machine Intelligence and Smart Systems. So in this course, like topics like supervised learning, unsupervised learning, statistical machine learning, all these core concepts will be covered. So this is a good course for anyone who are interested to have some exposure to machine learning, right? If there's anyone who wants to do something else but is interested to have some exposure to machine learning, this is a good course for those people to take. And then we have advanced signal processing. So in this course, we discuss things like adaptive signal processing, dimension reduction, PCA, eigenvalues, like fundamentals of optimizations, these kind of topics. So people who want to specialize in machine learning, this is a good course to take. And also there's a course offered from engineering mathematics called optimization, where topics like convex optimization, nonlinear optimization, gradient descent, all these things are covered. So that's another good course to take. Then we have very specific courses that are related to machine learning, right? So we have image and video coding, nonlinear and multivariable systems, speech recognition, right? So these are basically topics that have applications. Like these are basically where machine learning is applied, right? So taking these courses will create the background for you to like engage in a career in a related field. And also there's a course called digital communication. It's a communication course, but it talks about fundamentals in information theory, like what is entropy, things like that. So it's useful to take that course as well if you want to have more theoretical background, if you want to enter into machine learning. So in computer engineering, we have more direct courses related to machine learning, right? So we have fundamentals of AI and also applied data science, artificial neural networks and deep learning. And then we have these, like advanced courses that have some application in machine learning, things like image processing, data engineering, computer vision, NLP, right? And they also have a course called Parallel Computation and Algorithms, which is a very important course in this era because like this is how like most modern machine learning architectures are implemented, right? So parallel processing, GPUs, all these things will be covered in this course. So which is also going to be very important course to take. Okay, so that's a very brief overview of the type of courses offered in Peradeniya. Right. So now I will be talking about like what are the core skills that you need to develop, like if you are eyeing for a career in machine learning and artificial intelligence, right? So what I think is programming is going to be a core competency, right? So I know in Peradeniya, all students they go through Python in the first year, and both computer engineering and electrical engineering students they have a course in Java where they cover double OP, right? Object oriented programming concepts. So students who are uh, in third and fourth year they are already familiar with these two languages. But if you have some background in C++, that will be extra advantage, especially if you are implementing very lower level, like implementations, right? So in applications where speed is a very integral part of the product, we will be doing some applications, some implementations in C++. But for the most part, machine learning and AI, the language we use is Python. So if you know Python, that's already good enough. Uh, Java, C++ would be a bonus. Okay. But what's important is to be like very familiar with concepts of object-oriented programming, right? So because in the industry, this is how things are implemented, right? Like we write modularized code. So it's very good if you have some expertise, some hands-on experience with double OP, right? So what I recommend is for you to get yourself familiar with version control, right? So create a GitHub account, learn how to use GitHub and have some exposure there. That's going to be real useful. And also by doing that, try to learn like what are the best practices in software engineering. So maybe computer engineering students are more familiar with these concepts. Electrical engineering students may not be. So this is the area that you can definitely, develop your skill, right? So one way to do this is to read more and more production code, right? So for an example, if you're interested in machine learning, right? So there are several packages, right? Machine learning platforms, right? So you have PyTorch, then you have Hugging Face, then you have VLLM. These are machine learning related platforms, right? So reading these code, like so all these platforms are publicly available. So you can go online to the GitHub and see how these platforms implement like various machine learning algorithms, right? So reading this code, getting familiarized with this code is a good way of identifying good software practices. And also this will help you to understand these algorithms at a very fundamental level, right? Uh, and like when we write production code, something we do is like we maintain good documentation, right? So as students, maybe you're not very used to do this, but it's a good idea if you can start practicing good documentation practices, right? And also things like software testing, right? So the bottom line here is think about like what an employer in the industry will be expecting from a employee, right? They want you to write production type code, production level code, right? So things where everything is highly modularized, right? Where everything is documented very nice, where every component has a unit test, right? And like of course version controlling, right? So a production code will have all these components, right? So it's a good thing if you can start these practices right now. And also it's a great thing, right? Like if you can start contributing to some of the open source projects, right? So if you don't have a GitHub account, it's a great idea to create one, right? And try to contribute to these projects, right? Because this would be one way of showing your interviewers, right, your skill set. Like if you have a lot of contributions in open source projects, and also if like interviewers can come to your GitHub page and check out your code for themselves, right? So that is like one way of showcasing your skill set. At the same time, I believe in this day and age, it's also important to have some exposure to AI, right? So right now there are a lot of code assistant tools that use AI, right? So it's good to have some exposure, like like if you have some exposure using these AI tools, because when you go to the industry, at some point, right, they will also be using AI to an extent, right? So if you can demonstrate some skill set there, it will be a plus. My recommendation is like when you master these skills, right? When you master object oriented programming or algorithms, data structures, during that learning stage, don't use AI, right? Try to develop code by yourself. But once you have mastered this skill set, then try to see whether you can integrate AI agents in your workflow, right? Having that exposure will give you an edge. And at the same time, maybe try to think like what are the pitfalls of using AI agents, right? Like what are the best practices? How can we integrate AI agents more effectively in the development framework, right? So having these answers will be beneficial eventually when you have interview with a company. Right. So the second key component is data structures and algorithms. So I have a typo here. I apologize about that. So again, DEE students don't have this background, but there are a lot of online resources for you to master data structures and algorithms, right? So basically, data structures and algorithms are efficient ways to implement programs, right? So whoever is familiar with, for example, Python, know we have certain data containers, things like lists, right? So data structures are more efficient, like data containers that are, like very efficiently implemented, right? So things like queues, stacks, trees. And algorithms are, like a very efficient implementation of certain operations. For example, we have efficient implementations of searching and sorting, right? So studying data structures and algorithms will expose you to these efficient implementations. And these are, like commonly quizzed topics in interviews, right? So if you want, like even if you're not taken courses in your classes or in your university, you can still learn these things by using online resources, right? For example, I recommend this online resource called HackerRank. So they have a lot of tutorials as well as exercises, right, where you can practice your skill set. And also, there's another platform called LeetCode. So once you have mastered data structures and algorithms, you can use the LeetCode platform. So they have problems like sample uh, um, programming problems, right? So you can use this platform to test out your expertise. Right. And then again, if you want to broaden your knowledge in machine learning and deep learning, there are a lot of resources online that you can look into. So for an example, there is a course series from Stanford, right? So it covers image understanding, deep learning, neural networks, then machine vision, and also natural language processing. That's a separate course. And also there's a separate course on reinforcement learning, right? So Stanford course series is something I personally recommend. And also there are like machine learning course series from Andrew Ng. It's another very popular course series, right? But apart from these course series, there are many other online resources that you can take advantage of, right? So go online if you want to learn about machine learning, if you want to expand your knowledge. There are a lot of resources that you can use online. There are a lot of resources on YouTube, right? So go online and start studying these by yourself, right? So that is like self-studying is going to be a key component that will help you along the journey. Right. So with that background, I will talk a little bit about interview preparation. Uh, so first of all, I will talk about internships for a moment because everyone will be going for internship during their third and fourth years, right? I believe that finding a good internship position is a key factor for having a good internship experience, right? So typically, roles that provide, like technical knowledge transferring, right? Like where you get to use your knowledge and learn new skills. That's a great place to do internship, right? Hands-on experience that will be relevant for your future roles. That will be a huge plus, right? And if this is the case, the advantage is like whatever the work you do during internship, you can use it to get a full-time offer later on, right? You can use this experience to market yourself, basically. So a good idea to identify good internship positions is to talk to your peers and your senior batchmates to learn like about their experiences. Talk to them and see like what kind of companies have growth potential, basically, right? In what sort of companies will give you the opportunity to improve your skill set, right? So having said that, some of the companies that are good to work at, they are not necessarily good places for internships, right? Unless they extend full-time offers, right? So if internship, there's a possibility for the internship to be converted to a full-time offer, then of course it's a good thing, right? But if that is not the case, just because the company has a good reputation or just because it's known to be a good place to work, right? Doesn't mean that internship experience is going to be a good one. So before you go for internship, my advice is do some prior research, identify companies that will give value to the time you're spending there. So, in general, for both internships and full time offers, I think one of the key components is that you stay visible, right? Your visibility is going to be a key factor uh, to get interviews and also to get offers, right? Actually, the reality is getting interviews can also be challenging, right? So, staying visible will help you a lot to get interviews to begin with, right? So how do we do that, right? The first thing is like having a lot of contacts, right? So make sure you maintain contacts with your senior batchmates and alumni, right? So I personally think organizations like PFA or UOPAA, which is the Alumni Association of University of Peradeniya, right? Having ties with these associations will expose you or let you network with some of the alumni, right? Which will be valuable when you need contacts, right, to get internship opportunities or interview opportunities. And also, something you can do is connect with potential employees, right? Maybe HR personnel or managers through social media. So for this, LinkedIn is a great resource, right? So using LinkedIn, like if you're following certain people in the industry, you can learn what the team is doing, right? And at the same time, you can use it as a platform to contact with managers, HR professionals, or professors, right? Even if you're going for academic lab, right? So it's a great way of connecting with them, right? And when you connect with them, make sure that you always like personalize your message rather than sending a generic message. You can tell about yourself, your achievements, and maybe talk in a way that is specific to the role and the company that you are targeting. Okay. And at the same time, in-person network events is also another good way of making contacts, right? So things like public talks, poster sessions, things like that. Like when you meet people, like people from industry, they will often come to these sessions, right? So that is a great way of being in contact with potential employees. Okay. Right. So when you meet these people, right, when you network with these people, uh, one important thing is known as the elevator pitch. Okay. So what is the elevator pitch, right? So imagine the scenario, right? Like you're in an elevator, right? And to the same elevator, like one of the prominent figures from the industry enters to the same elevator, right? So now you have like 30 seconds, like a very short time span to talk to this person, right? So you basically have 30 seconds to make a good impression on this person, right? So elevator pitch is basically if you have 30 seconds to make a good impression on a person, right? What will you tell that person? So that is called the elevator pitch. Okay. So like key things that you can talk about here is to briefly introduce yourself, right? And then explain what you do, and also have a unique value proposition. You have to think about things that will make you stand out, right? So for an example, if you are doing an interesting project, right, if you have a breakthrough idea, these things can help you stand out, right? And also call to action, like what do you want the audience to do, right? So if you meet someone at a networking event, maybe something you can do is to ask whether it's okay to add that person on LinkedIn, right? Maybe ask for a business card, right? Things like that. So basically, when you do this elevator pitch, like you need to make sure that you make a high impact in a very short span of time, right? Uh, and one way of doing this is to make sure you use measurable performance statistic when you describe what you have done, right? So rather than saying I did this, you can say like I did this and improved the performance by this much, right? So presenting this information in that way helps to make your presence more impactful, right? So elevator pitch, like you don't want to do this, right? Like when you are on the spot, ideally you should do this beforehand, right? Like plan for it, right? Write a script of what you want to say, practice it, uh, practice it over and over again, like refine it, make it perfect, right? So practice makes perfect. So I believe at this point, every one of you needs to write your own elevator pitch. Right. So there are several keys for success, I believe, in the interviewing process. The main thing is you need to help recruiters to hire you, right? In other words, you need to present all the facts, good facts about yourself, right? You need to market yourself really well to have an impact. So one way of doing that is to have a strong online presence, right? So if you have a website, if you have a GitHub account, that's great. And at minimum, you should have a LinkedIn profile and update that LinkedIn profile with your achievements, project details, publications, all this stuff. And at the same time, like if you have a website, right, like you can have demo videos, you can have blogs, all these things, right? So whoever is interested in you, you need to make it very easy for that person to find out interesting things about you, right? Things you have done, the skills you have, you need to put it out there, market yourself. So anyone, like whoever is interested to hire you, right, all the information is readily available in an accessible form. That is very important. At the same time, like your resume is going to be another key point. I will talk a little bit about resumes in detail. even when you prepare the resume, right? Like everything should be presented in a easy to read manner. Like all the facts needs to be presented so that like you're basically helping your recruiter to hire you. And at the same time, using meaningful references is another key point, which I will elaborate in detail in a bit. Like every second you spend with a recruiter or a manager, right, it's an opportunity to market yourself. So every word you speak, you should be marketing yourself, right? Don't waste even a word, right? Even a second. Every moment should be used for your advantage, right? So throughout the process, you should demonstrate your professionalism. You should show with your words, the way you speak, the way you approach them, that you have professional qualities, right? And then like you should be prepared with key numbers, right? The deliverables you have delivered in your previous projects, right? All the related things to market yourself, you should be readily prepared with that. So as I mentioned before, it's great if you can have website, it's great if you can have a good resume, right? So these things should be prepared in advance. And also, the easiest thing to do, right, is to know your stuff, the technical knowledge, right? Course content, and also if you do independent learning based on online resources, you need to be like really familiar with all these concepts, right? So that's the easiest thing that one can do, right? Right. So I will briefly talk about how to build your resume, right? So there are a lot of resources again. Like if you want to know like what is a good resume template, go online, do some research. There are templates readily available, right? But ideally it should be a one pager, maximum two pages, right? And then like when you write a resume or a cover letter, make sure that like you personalize it to fit to the role that you're applying, right? So in certain roles, like they might be looking for a specific type of a person, right? So in that case, you need to highlight certain aspects of your profile that are related to that role. Okay. So it's a good idea to research the company, research the role beforehand, right? And also, like if it is a company doing a particular product, right? It's a good idea to have some background, right? So read papers, read blog posts related to that product, right? So that is going to be like extra helpful. Okay. And when you prepare the resume, make sure you highlight your research or project work, right? So having 1 to 2 lines of concise description is important. At the same time, as I mentioned before, you need to highlight your performances, right? Like what is the deliverable you achieved there, right? What is the improvement in terms of absolute numbers or relative numbers, right? So having these key numbers is going to be really important. And at the same time, certain employers who have like higher number of resumes, they may use automated system to screen resumes, right? So having correct keywords is going to be important, right? So a good idea is to specify your skills, right? So if you have expertise in machine learning, for example, you can list them as your skills, right? Because if the automated system is looking for certain keywords like machine learning, right? That is how your resume might be getting picked. I know it's not ideal, but this is the reality of the world. So make sure to focus on that. So next, I will talk about recommendations. This is often something that is overlooked by students, right? So good recommendations, they have to be specific, personal, and impactful, right? All these three factors, right? So of course the reputation of your reference, that matters a lot, right? So for example, getting a recommendation from from someone like Professor Janaka is going to be really impactful because people in the industry, right, they will know who is Professor Janaka, right? So he's a highly qualified history professor. So they are more likely to value his word as opposed to a random engineer, right? So getting recommendations from reputed people, that is extremely important, right? But at the same time, it only works if the recommendation is specific, personal, and impactful, right? For example, if Professor Janaka doesn't know you personally or the work you did personally, then it's very hard for him to give a meaningful recommendation. So in general, for university students, a good way to start is a lecturer or a professor that you have directly worked with, right? So ideally, a project supervisor, okay, or internship mentors or managers in these companies who directly worked with you, right? Who know the kind of work you did, things you achieved, right? Who can give, like a very detailed explanation of what you did. And also, as a rule of thumb, it's a great idea to talk to your reference, right? Tell them that you are listing that person as your reference, right? Provide your resume, provide all your details to that person so he knows like what to tell in case someone contacts them for a reference. Right. So with that background, let's talk a little about interviews. So in general, there are like three phases in an interview, right? So in some companies, they may carry out initial like screening round, right? So it's basically, like doing an interview is a costly process for a company. So what they do is like they do this initial screening rounds to remove obvious bad like candidates, right? So this could be a virtual interview over a Zoom call, or it can be a in-person interview, right? So in a screen interview, they will be basically going through basic competency skills, right? So for an example, it can be a coding interview, it can be a machine learning interview where they quiz you for like basic fundamentals of machine learning, right? And once you pass the screening round, you will be invited for an on-site, right? So depending on the company, it can have multiple rounds with different interviewers, right? So in the on-site, they will assess whether you have the core competencies. And here, they will also have behavioral interviews, right? Which I will talk in detail in a bit. So after all these rounds are concluded, what typically happens is the interviewers, they get together, they discuss pros and cons, and based on that, they make a decision, right? So at that point, they will communicate the decision with you. Okay. Right. So types of interviews, there are like multiple types of interviews, right? So there can be coding interviews, right? So in coding interviews, like a very popular coding interview type is to have data structures and algorithms. So I mentioned lead code before, right? So that is a very popular interview preparation tool. So students basically go through lead code and go through these questions. And most companies, they use a similar pattern questions during interviews, right? And then you can have machine learning coding interview, right? So machine learning coding is basically asking you to implement a specific machine learning algorithm without using machine learning packages, right? So this is again assessing your understanding of the machine learning algorithm and also to see if you can implement them in code. And especially for software engineering heavy roles, there can be a double OP design interview where you will be asked to design a double OP hierarchy and then code it. Okay. And then we have machine learning related interviews. We have, like machine learning knowledge interviews where, like questions about generic machine learning topics will be asked. And also, if your role is a more algorithm developing kind of a role, right? Especially if you have some research background, if you have a lot of projects, they can also have a research oriented interview where they will dive into your work and ask questions about it to understand your understanding. Okay. And typically, they can also have design interviews. It's basically asking you to design an end-to-end system that is related to their product. Typically, this may happen at a higher level, but I've also listed it here for completion. And then we have behavioral interviews. So I will talk more about behavioral interviews in a minute. Right. So what are behavioral interviews? So basically, it's a way of assessing how candidates operate as a team player, right? How they handle situations, things like that, right? So when we talk about the technical interviews, right, all the things I listed before, right? Coding interviews, machine learning interviews, they all are kind of assessing your problem solving skills, right? But it doesn't really tell them like your behavior as a team player, right? So behavioral interviews are specifically designed to assess these competencies, right? So the goal here is to assess whether a given candidate is a good fit for the company culture. Okay. So basically, an ideal candidate will have problem solving abilities, right? When I say problem solving here, I'm not talking about solving computer problems, right? I'm talking about, in situations where there are challenges, how can you navigate through challenges, things like that, right? So how do you face challenges, and how do you learn from failure, things like that, right? Are you able to respect team members and stakeholders, right? Do you have integrity, things like that, okay? So when facing behavioral interviews, like it's a good thing to think about examples from your past, right? So this can be the project work you did as a group, it can be your internship work, right? Or it can be even extracurricular activities you did, right? Think about situations where, basically stories that can demonstrate these traits, okay? So for an example, like common behavioral interview questions, they include things like the following, right? So describe your strengths and weaknesses. Describe a project that you played a significant role, right? Describe a challenge you faced in the project. Give an example where you had a disagreement with a team member, right? Describe a time where you failed in a project, right? How did you recover from it? And what will you do differently in the next time? Things like that, okay? So again, if you go online, you can find a lot of behavioral questions online. So it's a good idea to go through these questions, right, and think about a story from your past that will be a good example uh, when you answer these questions, right? So for example, if interviewers ask you like describe a time when you failed in a project, right, you should think about situations where you failed in the project, right? And think about like how you overcome those challenges, like things you can do differently. All these things you need to think beforehand, right? So it's a great idea to prepare for these questions. Think about scenarios beforehand, write up a story, and prepare beforehand. Okay. Right. So, a popular way to face behavioral interviews is to follow this framework called the STAR framework. Okay. So again, there are a lot of like online resources on STAR framework, right? There are a lot of YouTube videos on this framework, right? So you can find examples, mock interviews, all these things are available online, right? So I recommend researching a little bit. I'm just trying to introduce this concept to you guys right now. Okay. So in the STAR method, basically the idea is you want to explain your situation in 4 stages, right? So S is stands for situation, right? So um, given a question, you need to explain your situation very briefly in detail, okay? And then T basically talks about the task, right? So you need to dive deep and explain like what are the challenges, uh, like what is the task that you wanted to solve, what were the challenges, what were the difficulties, all these things in detail, right? So situation and task are basically ways of setting your background, right? You're basically setting the story, setting the background of your story, right? So that the interviewer has enough context to judge your actions. Okay. So third point is the actions. So here you basically describe specifically what you did. Okay. In detail, step by step. So bulk of your answer, 60% of it should be on describing the action, right? So you can talk about, like so when you describe actions, you need to highlight, right, the kind of character traits that demonstrates your validity as a candidate. Okay. And the final stage is results. So you have to tell whether, like, were you able to solve the problem? If not, what went wrong, right? And what are the learnings that you can learn, and things you will do differently in the future, things like that. So it's a good idea to look into some commonly asked interview questions, right, and put it in the star framework, and then basically practice a lot. In general, some good practices are the following, right? So make sure when you describe things, right, you always draw examples from your experience, right? Like if you want to highlight something that you did, right, draw examples from your past, right, and always highlight what you did, your contribution, right? So use the term I did, right? So as I mentioned earlier, right, like every second counts here, right? Every second you should be trying to market yourself, right? So drawing examples where you had a huge individual contribution. That's a key, right? And also you need to always quantify your achievements, like use numbers, use percentages, right? You need to convey the impact you had in your contribution, right? So always try to quantify your achievement in terms of quantities. Okay. And also, it's important to talk positively, right? Especially when they ask about challenges you faced, like issues you had with team members. Okay. You need to bring out a positive image, a positive outlook when you describe these things, right? So even when you describe something that was very challenging, right, a disagreement or whatever, right, you need to do it in a positive tone. Okay. So this is why preparing for them beforehand is a great idea, because you can actually write a script, practice, iterate it over a couple of times, maybe do it with a friend, do a mock interview with a friend, right? So you can brush up on these things, right? Doing this straight away in an interview is going to be challenging. Make sure you focus on the kind of competencies the job is required, right? So especially when they ask a question, like you need to be smart enough to realize, like, what are the things that they are trying to assess by asking this question, right? And you need to kind of frame your answer so that you cover all the bases that the interviewer is trying to test you for, right? So you need to reveal the skills, right, that the interviewer is testing you for. Okay. So that comes with some practice. Okay. And a key point here is to always speak the truth, right? So don't fabricate stories, uh, because like good interviewers, right, they will always cross question you, right? And if you're fabricating stories, it's going to come out. So that's very important, right? Be truthful, draw examples from your real experiences, don't make stories up. Right. So with that, I think the content that I wanted to cover comes to a conclusion. Uh, but I have repeated a slide here, right? Because I wanted to give you the key takeaways, right? So going from the bottom, the main thing is you need to know your stuff, right? So make sure third year and fourth year studies, right, take full advantage of your studies, right? Like really use these courses to develop your skills. Don't just think about passing exams, don't just think about improving your GPA. Make sure that you use these classes to improve your skill set. Okay, that's very important. And also go online, expand your knowledge. If you don't have background on double OP, if you don't have a background on data structures algorithms, take some online courses, expand your knowledge. That's very important, right? Know your stuff. And the second point is, like every second matters, as I mentioned, right? Always try to maximize the impact you have, like the interaction you have with recruiters and managers. Make sure you use every second to market yourself. Okay. So I know traditionally people from Sri Lanka, they are not really willing to market yourselves, but I think it's an admirable trait, but the only exception is interviews. In interviews, every second you need to use that to market yourself, right? Bring out your achievements, right? Bring out your good qualities. Try to market yourself. Show that you're professional during your entire interaction with the industry. And the top point is, like, you need to make life of recruiters easy, right? Make it easier for them to hire you. Present all the facts so that everything about you is readily available, right? Have a good strong online presence. Like, if you have demos, if you have presentations, upload it online, right? Have a LinkedIn profile, and basically, like, have these information readily accessible. If anyone is remotely interested in you, it should be very easy for them to get all the relevant information about you, so that it makes their life easy. Okay. And it's also important to have meaningful references, right? So what is the key point here is to have, like, meaningful interactions with your lecturers during the final 2 years, right? So as I mentioned, doing projects with them is a great idea. Engaging with discussions with them, another great idea, right? Make sure that your lecturers see you, make sure that they know you, make sure that they are aware of the impact you have in your work. Make yourself visible, basically. Okay. So as I mentioned at the beginning of the talk, right now we have a lot of alumni from Peradeniya at top places in the world, top companies in the world, in the AI and machine learning sphere. So it means that you can also achieve that, right? Because they also receive the same education that you are receiving right now. Uh, so I hope you will draw inspiration from all the success stories from our alumni. And also, I hope that the tips I gave you during this talk, the guidance I gave you, will be helpful for you to do your interviews, to do your job search, to do your job preparation very well. And I wish you all the very best in your future career search. Thank you very much.